Dear student, today we will discuss on the topic host pathogen environment interaction. Environment play a more determined part in host pathogen interaction, that is phytopathology, than in human pathology, as it affects vitally the growth of plant and life processes. In plants more than in man, plants react readily both internally and externally and continuing modifying their mode of life, their structure and also its organization to suit weather changing outside the environment. Hence, disease is a complex phenomena resulting from an interaction among the host, the pathogen and environment. Numerous factors causes of the disease, but how all of them interact is a complex situation. The cause of disease can be grouped into those associated with the environment, nutritional and genetical factor of the host or infection agent or pathogen. That is, it depends on their susceptibility or resistance of the host, the relative aggressiveness and virulence of the pathogen and various factors of the environment combined and reacts, or to put it in other word, disease is a spectrum of response of dependent on the intensity of the interaction of variable defined from the host, the pathogen and environment. Numerous graphical representation of the three variables are used, interconnecting the three rings being the popular. All the three variables play a vital role, hence it is difficult for accurate assessment, but can be determined cumulative effect. The complex nature of the interaction between the host, pathogen and environment requires an understanding of these variables which are discussed. Environment. The environment is perhaps the least defined element of the host, pathogen and environment pentagram. The components of the environment are evident. Chemical and physical characteristics can be measured either continuously or more often at specific time points, often after a disease problem has arisen. The effect of biological processes, they affect the diversity and density of the biota, which encourages certain host, pathogen and other symbiont. The pathogen are directly relevant to the outcomes of their interaction with the host and the environment. The pathogen is always associated with infection of the host, that is obligate, or whether it has the ability to survive in the absence of the host, that is facultative. The virulence or the ability of the pathogen to cause disease depends on the strain, biotype, serotype or genotype of the agent, the dose or the number of the pathogens, how they are delivered to the host, that is route of entry, and duration of exposure directly influences the severity of subsequent infection. The host. Several parameters associated with the host are directly related with the occurrence of the disease upon interaction with the appropriate pathogen and environmental condition. Factors associated are constant, present or constructive, such as the host species, genotype, age, size and developmental stage, nutrition and reproductive status, and the behavior and intent defense related to the immune competence. The ecological aspects of the disease development in the plant is open to new field of investigation. Environment comprises of three groups. These factor acts alone, cumulative effect, sometimes acts independently directly on the pathogen and indirectly through host. 1. Meteorology. So, meteorological factors. Meteorological or environmental factor acts on the parasite, on the host, or on both when brought into the association. Temperature, humidity, light and nutritional condition are the chief factors which affects the pathogen and the plant diseases. Diseases can be grouped in a broad sense, that is tropical, temperature and subtropical, depending upon the climatic condition or the type of vegetation. Air temperature influences the development of the disease. Low temperature, usually referred to the freezing injury or frost necrosis, and high temperature when the hosts are subjected to extreme heat due to direct sunlight reaching earth surface. Humidity not only influences the development of the disease, it also controls infectivity, incubation period of the disease. Precipitation and dew factor increases the atmospheric humidity. Hailstorm, lightning increases the atmospheric humidity. Soil factors. The development of soil-borne disease is greatly modified by the soil factor, their cause, incidence and severity and even distribution. This factor affects the susceptible host to the ever changing microclimates of the soil. Soil are known to harbor pathogenic organism. It becomes unfit for cultivation, that is sick soil. Soil temperature acts directly on the host through its development of the disease. Soil moisture favors the development of the disease incidence. Some of them may prefer a relatively high moisture level, while others may be sensitive to excess. It can be correlated with the development of root rot diseases. Soil condition. Measures of alkalinity and acidity influences the pathogen to establish or induce disease. Soil deficiency. Imbalance in nutrient, especially minor element, favors the development of the diseases. All these factors tend to make up a microclimate which influences diseases. Biological factor. The factor includes the insect population of the locality and flora in the soil. The insect fauna, these act as a vector influencing in distribution, severity and new introduction in virus diseases. Soil flora comprises bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa, either saprophytic or parasitic. The position regarding their interaction between them and vary influencing incidence of the disease is more complex. With the brief illustration of the environment, now we will discuss about how host pathogen interact. Interaction of microbes with the host is of the following type. Mutualism. Both microbes and the host are benefited by the interaction. Communalism. Either host or microbes is benefited while other is not affected by the interaction. Parasitism. Microbes is benefited at the expense of the host. Of all the interaction, we will discuss parasitism, which explains host pathogen interaction. The relation between a host and a pathogen is dynamic and the stages can be studied as 1. Invasion of the host through primary barrier, that is, the ability for a pathogen to overcome host defense can be accomplished by two distinct components. A primary pathogen causes diseases in a healthy host and opportunistic pathogen cause disease if host is immune compromised. Evasion of the local and tissue defense by microbes. The greater the virulence, the more likely disease will occur. Such factor includes ability of pathogen to adhere to the host, ability of the pathogen to colonize, that is to overcome a host, and the ability of pathogen to evade host defense. 3. Microbes replication with or without spread in the body depends on pathogens invasiveness, that is ability to invade tissue. Finally, pathogen can evade tissue within the body and produce toxins. 4. A host immunological ability. Several factors influences pathogen's relationship to its host and level of the severity, which includes pathogenicity, that is the ability to produce disease in a host organism, virulence, the degree of pathogenicity of a pathogen. Determinant of virulence of a pathogen includes genetic, biochemical and structural features. Infectivity, the level at which a pathogen is able to infect or invade a host. Transmissible ability, the measure of a pathogenic ability to spread from one host to the next. The period depends on dose level of pathogens, pathotype, virulence and host health. Or in terms of parasitism, nature of pathogen connection with the host can be prepenetrance stage, the degree of infectivity, development of inoculum with microbial condition. The penetrance stage, the parasite gains entry inside the host, which can be studied in two stages, that is mechanism of infection and the path of infection. 3. Post penetrance stage, the result of the infectivity is due to development and establishment of pathogen in host mechanism of pathogenesis, which can be explained in 8 steps, that is transmission, adherence, invasion, colonization, evasion of the host defense, cause damage or disease to the host, exist from the body, survival in the environment. Or pathogenesis is the process of pathogenesis. 3 distinct phases are involved. 1. Inoculation, that is transfer of the pathogen to the infection area in which invasion of the plant occurs. Incubation, the development of the disease, a specific period of time, arrival and appearance of various symptoms. Infection, the exhibited disease symptom accomplished by the establishment and spread of the pathogen. However, we will proceed according as the mechanism of infection, the path of infection or avenue of the penetrance, the mechanism of pathogenesis. The mechanism of infection. The actual process differs accordingly to the pathogen. In case of fungi, the mechanism is active or aggressive, whereas in bacteria and viruses is of the passive type. In fungi, the process starts with contact of the spores with the host. Spore lodges and is stimulated to germinate by the growth. The germ tube grows and attaches firmly by a specialized structure, the apasorium, thus makes an aggressive effort. On the other hand, the process of penetration of bacterial pathogen is of passive type. There is no direct attack and no mechanical pressure exerted. The path of infection. The path of infection is concerned with the entry of the parasite into the host. The process may take place through several avenues: direct penetration or indirect penetration. The most important mode of parasite into the host are being: 1. The entry through intact surface. This type of infection is common in plant pathogenic fungi. Penetration into the organ by protective layer other than the cuticle. Entry through non-cutinized surface. There is several tissue without cuticle which make a way for pathogen migration into deep seated tissue. Example: flower infection, seedling infection, bud infection, needle leaves, root hairs, etc. Entry through natural opening. Natural openings such as stomata, lenticels and hydrothodes serves a avenue for the entry of the plant pathogen. Entry through artificial opening. Artificial openings resulted due to the wound or trauma or lesions, etc. The mechanism of pathogenesis. Pathogenesis is the method by which a disease can develop. It occurs by pathogen invading and breaching the body barrier in order to multiply. So, these organisms have mechanisms that will not allow host defense against the pathogen to destroy them. Production of disease occurs through a process of the step is transmission. Transmission of infectious agent can occur in many as discussed earlier. In order to begin infection and eventually cause disease, pathogen must find a transmission route. Adherence. Once the pathogen has gained access to the body, it must have some means of attaching itself to the host tissue. This attachment is called adherence and is necessary to induce pathogenicity. Pathogen may have specific adherence mechanism to attach to the cell or tissue surface, like tissue tropism, that is pathogen that only infect certain species, and generic specificity, that is surface mutation that occurs so previous antibiotics do not recognize the invading pathogens. Invasion. Microorganism is exposed to many barriers after introduction into the host. Once the barrier has been penetrated, these pathogens can multiply without competition. Colonization. Colonization is the multiplication of pathogenic organism where toxins are produced and the normal flora are overcome. The pathogen compete with the normal flora for space and nutrient. Pathogen usually colonizes host tissue that is in contact with the external environment. During colonization, the host began to show sign or symptoms. The pathogen can be grouped into a specific and non-specific types depending on the establishment of the parasitic relationship and subsequent development. In the first type, obligate parasite establish relation with the host, while in the second type the pathogen brings about virulence changes and destroys tissue in advances. Evasion of host defense. After colonization, pathogen curcumate the host innate and adapt defense. Multiple mechanisms are used by pathogen to evade the host immune system. Intercellular pathogen that live inside a host cell. avoid phagocytes recognition by producing capsule, prevent the phagocytosis, producing membrane damaging toxin which can kill phagocytosis, interfere with complement activation, survival in the phagocyte. Pathogen can produce protease, allows each pathogen to avoid antibiotic catalase, prevents the digestion of the engulfing pathogen. They also utilize antigenic variation to alter the antigen structure. In addition, pathogen can mimic host molecules which can cause disease related damages. Cause damage or disease to host while avoiding the host defenses. Damage can occur through direct or indirect pathway. Direct method produce toxin which are poisonous member that produce toxemia without a host. There are three types of the toxin: exotoxin, proteins secreted by pathogen that cause damage to the host; endotoxin, toxic substance that are released when a cell is killed; exoenzymes, enzymes that function outside the host cell or tissue existing the host. A pathogen can exist from the body through various routes, survival outside the host. Finally, a pathogen survives in the environment till transmitted to the another host. Or how the pathogen attacks the plants. Physiology of parasitism in concern with interaction of the two biological entity and relative compatibility of host pathogen is strongly influenced by genetic factors. The structure of epidermal, that is cell wall, the size, location and shape of the stomata and lenticels to affect the penetrance of the host by pathogen. Successful penetration of the host by pathogen does not imply infection. Infection results from the establishment of the pathogen within the host. After infection is established, follows a period of incubation and visible sign of the presence of the parasite are seen. The mechanism of infection includes the various processes by means of which infection takes place. The activity of pathogen in plant are mostly chemical in nature, and therefore the disease caused by pathogen on plant are the result of the biochemical reaction that takes place between the substances secreted by the causal agent and those present within the plant. The substance secreted by the pathogen in plant is responsible for causing disease either directly or indirectly. Includes enzymes, toxin, growth regulator, polysaccharides and antibiotics. These groups of chemical substances vary in pathogenicity and their relative importance may differ from one disease to another. Now, the question rises, what is the significance of host pathogen and environment reaction? Host pathogen interaction provides information that can help scientists and researchers understand the disease pathogenesis, the biology of one and many pathogens, as well as the biology of the host. It is thought this interaction that basic research discovery are made. Conclusion: microorganisms are located everywhere and there are many more microbes than host. According to the causal agent, they may be grouped as disease caused by animate mechanism, disease incited by fungi, disease incited by bacteria, disease incited by mycoplasma, disease incited by alga, disease incited by phanerograms, disease incited by nematodes, disease caused by virus pathogen, and disease caused by inanimate pathogen like high temperature effect, light effect, nutritional disorder, effect of the atmospheric humidity, etc. The goal for both host and pathogen is survival. Infection can be localized, local, or occur systematically. Further followed the colonization, ectoparasitic or endoparasitic, depending on the whether intra or intercellular or develops haustoria or not. Several factors affects the balance between the health and infectious disease microclimate. Pathogenesis depends on genetics, the state of the host health, age, stress, and also environmental